given the topic today of a quote that Zig Ziglar, I think is famous for, where he says, a goal casually taken is easily abandoned upon first obstacle. And that's where we've been. We've been there for years, where the budget resolution is a goal that's casually undertaken. No one really expects it to go anywhere, and it's easily abandoned. And everyone can do their post, and we can all pretend that we're really serious about doing something about it, but at the end of the day, nothing is modified. So I'm grateful that we're not going to be set up for failure if we can move this direction. Many of us in this building know this is the week where a lot of appropriation decisions are being made. This is the week where a lot of different industry and money discussions are happening, people asking for more. I had conversations this week with some groups, and it's such a hard thing to try to relay to people, because whether it be industry specific or association specific, everyone is so short-term focused about their need and more federal funds. And where I'm trying to set this up is trying to explain to someone to see the bigger picture, that if we can get to a 3% deficit to GDP, which is what the goal of this is, which is going to require restraint. Real restraint, not proposed restraint, but actionable restraint. It reminds me of something I read years ago in Stanford University, where they took a marshmallow and they set it in front of 600 4-year-olds one at a time, and they gave them these instructions. They watched them through a blindsided window panel. They said, don't eat the marshmallow. And out of 600, only 200 of the 4-year-olds were able to withstand the instant gratification desire to eat the marshmallow. So if the kid licked it, they're out. They didn't pass the test. If they nibbled on it and thought nobody's looking, they're out. Of the 200 who didn't give in to the instant gratification, they wanted to see where they were at 15 years later at Stanford University, 1965 study, and they found that those 200 young adults who at 4 years of age decided to obey the instructions, they were 200 points higher on their SAT scores. They wrote a book about it called Emotional Intelligence, because what was so outstanding to them was there was no correlation between those 200 among the 600 control group about their IQ. It had nothing to do with their IQ. It had to do with their ability to perceive a brighter future if they could restrain themselves in the moment. So how do you convince people to not eat the marshmallow of increased government spending? What we're talking about in this moment is simply just a restraint. We're talking about flat budgeting. The concept of, can everybody on both sides of the aisle agree, let's just hold steady through some of this and just have some flat budgeting. Now, I'd go farther, because I think in order to get to a balanced budget, we all know with $2 trillion annual deficits that we are at a place where waste, fraud, and abuse, I just am not convinced it was like it was when the guy I worked for 20 years ago, Tom Coburn, Jody Arrington, it was a time 10, 15 years ago where waste, fraud, and abuse could get us there. I think we're past that now. I think we have to get serious about amputation of some programs that we all know are wasteful. That's the truth. But what we're talking about at least gets us into actionable items that could reset this problem. So, $1 trillion total gross national debt in 1981. Every year we overspend. It took us 200 years as a nation to get to what we got to in 1981, total gross national debt. Every year we overspend that because we had a $2 trillion deficit. This thing is cascading on us. How do we convince the average person that hyperinflation is your future? You need to care more about what's going to happen to you and your industry. How do we get people to understand that is our future? I think it is hyperinflation. What you're experiencing now with rising costs, because as Tom McClintock eloquently always reminds us, when the government spends $1, you are going to pay for it, either through the tax that they're going to tax you for now or the hidden tax of inflation. The devaluation of the currency, you're paying for this. And don't be a marshmallow eater. Think long-term, and how every time that we're not paying, all of us wanting to get government spending under control, it's costing you and your industry. I'll land the plane and give you a chance to answer it. But to the ag producer, 10 years ago, you're paying $2 for T-post. Now they're $4+, $60 for a roll of barbed wire. Now it's twice that. What happens in another 10 years if in that industry it's twice that again? How do we convince the average person to care about the spending?
That is the biggest question. I do think that this discussion about affordability opens the door right now. We had huge inflation just a few years ago, and people are very aware of the pain that that can create. And I think there's a way to work that into the discussion going forward. I think trust is hard. Everybody's in their own ecosystem, but I think strange bedfellows and bipartisan agreement saying this fiscal situation is dangerous for us right now is critically important. So if people can come together and say this is a problem, we disagree on the solution, but this is a problem, maybe voters will believe more. I think that China probably doesn't eat the marshmallow. I do think that there is geopolitical risk and competitiveness about delaying gratification, and we've seen that with tensions around the world, being willing to do what you need to strengthen your country is critically important. So as these risks pop up, that may be effective too.